Don Knotts walked off the set of The Andy Griffith Show at the height of his fame, leaving behind one of television's most beloved characters and millions of confused fans. He was making good money, the show was a massive hit, and America couldn't get enough of Barney Fife. So why would he throw it all away? The answer involves a conversation that never happened, an assumption that changed everything, and a decision that haunted both Knotts and Andy Griffith for years to come. But here's the twist that nobody saw coming. The real reason Don Knotts left had nothing to do with creative differences or money problems. It was actually based on something Andy Griffith never said, a plan that never existed, and a future that was completely made up in someone's head. By the time the truth came out, it was already too late to fix, and the damage was done forever. Back in December 2024, new interviews and behind-the-scenes stories started coming out about what really happened between these two comedy legends. The full story is way more complicated than anyone thought, and it all started with Don Knotts sitting in his dressing room one day in 1964, thinking about his future and making a choice based on information that turned out to be completely wrong. The Andy Griffith Show was absolutely crushing it in the ratings during the mid-60s. Every Monday night, families across America gathered around their television sets to watch Andy Taylor keep the peace in Mayberry, while his deputy Barney Fife created chaos with his single bullet and overconfident attitude. Don Knotts had won 5 Emmy Awards for playing Barney, which is basically unheard of for a supporting actor in a comedy show. He was the breakout star, the fan favorite, and the reason millions of people tuned in every week. Andy Griffith was the calm center of the show, playing the wise and patient sheriff who had to constantly bail Barney out of trouble. But even though Andy got top billing and the show had his name on it, everyone knew that Don Knotts was the secret weapon. His physical comedy, his timing, his ability to make people laugh just by twitching his face, these were the things that made the show special. Without Barney Fife, The Andy Griffith Show would have been just another sitcom about small-town life. The show had been on the air for 5 seasons by 1965, and the network wanted to keep it going for as long as possible. CBS was making tons of money from advertising, the cast and crew had steady work, and nobody wanted the gravy train to stop. But Don Knotts was starting to think about his career beyond Mayberry. He was in his late 30s, and he knew that playing a bumbling deputy forever might not be the best move for his future. Hollywood was calling, movie studios were interested, and he wondered if maybe he should take a chance while he was still hot. Here's where things get interesting. Don Knotts heard through the grapevine that The Andy Griffith Show was going to end after the 5th season. He didn't hear this from Andy Griffith directly. He didn't hear it from the producers or the network executives. He heard it from someone else, probably another cast member or someone on the crew, and he believed it completely. In his mind, the show was wrapping up, everyone would be moving on, and he needed to start making plans for what came next. Based on this information, Don Knotts went to Andy Griffith and told him that he wouldn't be coming back for another season. It was a hard conversation because the two men were close friends, but Knotts felt like he was being professional and giving Andy plenty of notice. He explained that he needed to pursue other opportunities and that he had already started talking to movie studios about potential projects. Andy was surprised and sad, but he understood. If the show was ending anyway, it made sense for Don to move on and try something new, except the show wasn't ending. Not even close. Andy Griffith had never said the show was ending after 5 seasons. The network had never planned to cancel it. In fact, everyone involved with the show expected it to keep going for years because it was still one of the most popular programs on television. Somebody had started a rumor or misunderstood something, and that false information had spread until it reached Don Knotts, who made a life-changing decision based on a complete lie. By the time Don Knotts found out the truth, he had already signed contracts with Universal Pictures to make movies. He had committed to other projects, shaken hands on deals, and basically burned his bridges with The Andy Griffith Show. He couldn't just call up Andy and say, "Hey, I made a mistake, can I come back?" The wheels were already in motion, and there was no way to stop them. Don Knotts had quit one of the most successful shows on television because of a simple misunderstanding, and now he had to live with that choice. Andy Griffith was devastated when he realized what had happened. He had never planned to end the show after 5 seasons. He had never told anyone that he was thinking about quitting. The whole thing was based on a rumor that somehow got twisted and turned until it sounded like fact. Andy felt terrible, because he knew that if he had just sat down with Don and talked about the future of the show, this whole mess could have been avoided. But they had never had that conversation, and now his best friend and the show's biggest star was leaving. The Andy Griffith Show continued for 3 more seasons without Don Knotts as a regular cast member. Barney Fife would come back for a few guest appearances here and there, but it wasn't the same. The chemistry between Andy and Barney had been the heart of the show, and without that dynamic, something was missing. The show was still good and still popular, but fans could tell that the magic had faded a little bit. New characters were brought in to fill the void, but nobody could replace Barney Fife. Meanwhile, Don Knotts went off to make movies, and the results were mixed. He starred in films like The Ghost and Mr. Chicken and The Reluctant Astronaut, which were decent family comedies but nothing close to the cultural impact of The Andy Griffith Show. He made good money and stayed busy, but he was never quite as successful as he had been on television. Movie stardom is different from TV stardom, and Don Knotts learned that lesson the hard way. He spent the rest of his career wondering what might have been if he had just stayed in Mayberry. The story gets even sadder when you think about how easily it could have been prevented. If Andy Griffith had pulled Don Knotts aside and said, "Hey, I'm planning to keep this show going for a long time. Would you be interested in staying?" If Don Knotts had gone directly to Andy instead of believing secondhand information. If the two friends had just communicated openly about their plans and their futures. Any of these conversations could have changed everything, but they never happened. Pride, assumptions, and bad information combined to create a disaster that nobody wanted. Recent interviews from December 2024 with people who worked on the show have revealed more details about this mess. Karen Knotts, Don's daughter, has been talking publicly about how her father regretted the decision for the rest of his life. She said he would bring it up in conversations, wondering out loud what would have happened if he had just asked Andy directly instead of trusting a rumor. Andy Griffith apparently felt guilty about it too, wishing he had been more open about his long-term plans for the show. Both men carried this regret with them, and it cast a shadow over what should have been a happy memory of working together. The entertainment industry is full of stories like this, where miscommunication, or bad timing, or simple bad luck ruins something good. But this one hits different because it was so preventable, and because it affected two people who genuinely cared about each other. Don Knotts and Andy Griffith weren't enemies fighting over money or screen time. They were friends who respected each other and enjoyed working together. The fact that their partnership ended because of a stupid misunderstanding makes it even more frustrating. Think about how many times in your own life you've made a decision based on what you thought was true, only to find out later that you had the wrong information. Maybe you turned down a job because you heard the company was going out of business, but they actually ended up thriving. Maybe you ended a friendship because someone told you something that wasn't accurate. We've all been there, and we all know how awful it feels when you realize you made the wrong choice for the wrong reasons. That's what happened to Don Knotts, except his wrong choice played out in front of millions of people and affected one of the most popular TV shows in American history. The Andy Griffith Show eventually ended in 1968, after 8 seasons total. By that point, Andy Griffith himself was ready to move on and try other things. The show had a good run, and it's still considered one of the best sitcoms ever made. But people who study television history always come back to the same question. How much better could it have been if Don Knotts had never left? What classic episodes and moments did we miss out on because Barney Fife wasn't there? It's impossible to know, but it's fun and also kind of sad to think about. After the Andy Griffith Show ended, both Andy and Don continued working in television and movies. They remained friends throughout their lives, and they even worked together again on other projects. But it was never quite the same as those first 5 seasons in Mayberry. That was lightning in a bottle, a perfect combination of writing, acting, and chemistry that comes along once in a lifetime. And it ended 3 years earlier than it should have because somebody started a rumor, and Don Knotts believed it. The lesson here isn't just about Hollywood or television. It's about the importance of direct communication, especially when big decisions are on the line. Don Knotts should have gone straight to Andy Griffith and asked him about the future of the show. Andy Griffith should have been more open with his cast about his long-term plans. The producers and network executives should have made sure everyone was on the same page. When people don't talk to each other and instead rely on gossip and assumptions, bad things happen. This is true whether you're making a TV show or running a business or just trying to maintain friendships. It's also a reminder that even successful people make mistakes based on bad information. Don Knotts wasn't some naive kid fresh off the bus in Hollywood. He was a seasoned performer who had won multiple Emmy Awards and knew how the industry worked. But he still fell for a rumor and made a decision that changed his life in ways he didn't expect. Being smart and experienced doesn't make you immune to misunderstandings. It just means you should know better than to trust secondhand information without verifying it first. The story of why Don Knotts left the Andy Griffith Show has been told many times over the years, but new details keep coming out. In December 2024, several entertainment websites published articles with fresh interviews and perspectives on what happened. These new accounts confirm what people had suspected for decades. Don Knotts made his choice based on false information, and by the time he realized his mistake, it was too late to undo it. The whole situation was a tragedy of miscommunication that could have been avoided with one simple conversation. What makes this story even more interesting is how it affected both men differently. Andy Griffith went on to have a long and successful career, including the hugely popular show Matlock in the 80s and 90s. He became a television icon and remained beloved by fans until his death in 2012. Don Knotts also had a good career with memorable roles in movies and TV shows like Three's Company, but he never quite reached the same level of success he had as Barney Fife. He spent years doing comedy and entertaining people, but there was always that sense that he had peaked early and then walked away from his best role. The relationship between Andy Griffith and Don Knotts stayed strong despite this professional setback. They would appear together at reunions and conventions, talking fondly about their time on the show and making each other laugh with old stories. Fans loved seeing them together because it reminded everyone of why the Andy Griffith Show was so special. The friendship was real, the respect was genuine, and the chemistry was undeniable. But underneath all that warmth, there was probably always a little bit of sadness about what might have been. Hollywood is full of what-if stories, and this is one of the biggest. What if Don Knotts had stayed on the Andy Griffith Show for all 8 seasons? What if Andy Griffith had been clearer about his plans? What if someone had corrected the rumor before Don made his decision? We'll never know the answers to these questions, but they're fascinating to think about. Television history would definitely be different, and the legacy of both actors might look different too. The timing of this story coming back into the news in December 2024 is interesting because it reminds us that even old Hollywood tales can teach us new lessons. In an age where communication is easier than ever with phones and email and text messages, people still make the same mistakes that Don Knotts and Andy Griffith made back in the 60s. We still rely on secondhand information instead of going directly to the source. We still make assumptions instead of asking questions. We still let pride or fear or awkwardness stop us from having important conversations. And then we spend years dealing with the consequences of those choices. The entertainment industry has changed dramatically since the days of the Andy Griffith Show. Actors have more power, contracts are more complex, and everyone has agents and lawyers to handle negotiations. But the human element hasn't changed at all. People still need to talk to each other honestly and openly. They still need to verify information before making big decisions. They still need to prioritize relationships over assumptions. These are timeless lessons that apply whether you're making a sitcom in 1965 or running a business in 2024. Don Knotts passed away in 2006, and Andy Griffith died in 2012. Both men lived long lives and accomplished a lot, but this one mistake probably stayed with them until the end. In interviews given late in their lives, both actors would bring up the subject with a mixture of sadness and resignation. They had moved past it and remained friends, but they never really got over it. How could they? It was one of those sliding door moments where everything could have been different if just one thing had changed. The legacy of the Andy Griffith Show remains strong more than 50 years after it went off the air. New generations continue to discover Mayberry and fall in love with the characters. Streaming services have made it easier than ever to watch old episodes, and the show still resonates with people who appreciate its gentle humor and positive values. When people watch those first 5 seasons with Don Knotts, they're seeing television magic that almost lasted longer, but didn't because of a simple misunderstanding. This story matters because it shows how fragile success can be and how easily good things can fall apart. The Andy Griffith Show had everything going for it. Great writing, talented actors, strong ratings, network support, and audience love. But one rumor and one misunderstanding were enough to change the course of television history. It's a sobering reminder that success requires more than just talent and luck. It also requires clear communication, trust, and the willingness to have difficult conversations instead of making assumptions. At the end of the day, Don Knotts made a choice based on what he believed to be true. He wasn't trying to hurt anyone or chase more money or create drama. He was trying to be professional and plan for his future. The fact that his information was wrong doesn't make him foolish or greedy. It makes him human. We all make decisions based on incomplete or inaccurate information sometimes. The difference is that most of our mistakes don't play out on national television or become part of entertainment history. Don Knotts had to live with his choice in public, which must have made it even harder to bear. Andy Griffith continued making television for 3 more seasons without his best friend and comedic partner, knowing that a simple conversation could have prevented all of this heartache. And millions of fans missed out on what could have been even more classic moments between Andy Taylor and Barney Fife, all because someone started a rumor about the show ending, and that rumor spread until it became believable enough to change everything. Don Knotts walked off the set of The Andy Griffith Show at the height of his fame, leaving behind one of television's most beloved characters and millions of confused fans. He was making good money, the show was a massive hit, and America couldn't get enough of Barney Fife. So why would he throw it all away? The answer involves a conversation that never happened, an assumption that changed everything, and a decision that haunted both Knotts and Andy Griffith for years to come.